If you believe that a Bible written by history's proven most ungodly group of people contained the true words of God, and that a Bible that was brutally beaten into the blood-soaked minds of our enslaved ancestors will now set us free, this video is not for you. If you also believe that Black people are being controlled by a silly slave syndrome myth, which presents what would in fact be the least effective method used for controlling generations of millions of people, this video is also not for you. This video is not being made for those of us whose minds have been so dumbed down and mentally enslaved by the white society that they refuse to critically think for themselves, and therefore lives their entire lives going from their cradles to their graves, believing things that literally insults their own intelligence. Therefore, they live and die being the white oppressors' mentally enslaved fools. This video provides the truth of our plight and condition for those who are sick and tired of believing in things that insult their own intelligence. The first step towards learning the truth of our plight and condition begins with first learning of the true underlying relationship that presently exists between the white society and its Black population. Here is the hidden reality. Although all white governments publicly profess equality for all their citizens, the hidden reality is that they're all secretly unrelentingly committed toward the preservation of their nation's white social dominance over their Black population. This unrelenting commitment has always necessitated that systems be put in place for maintaining their white social dominance over Black people. This is why, after the abolishment of slavery, all white nations developed unethical segregation systems that impeded the upward mobility and advancement of their Black population as a means of maintaining their nation's white dominance. In fact, if white governments did not develop systems for maintaining their white dominance over Black people, they would in fact be diametrically opposing their own self-interests. Therefore, when those blatant racist subjugation tactics used in the past for maintaining their white dominance over Black people became no longer socially acceptable with the changing times and also resulted in unprecedented unified Black protests, rather than abandoning the nefarious practice, the white ruling class instead developed more covert methods for meeting that objective. They now subjugate Black people through psychological warfare propaganda campaigns. Doing so provides the white oppressors with a more sophisticated method for maintaining their social dominance over Black people, given that these covert methods aren't as easily recognized nor easily comprehended by their Black victims. The subjugation of Black people always works best when the Black victims no longer recognize how it works. I will reveal 3 psychological warfare tactics that are presently being deployed against Black people for maintaining white social dominance. The first one being the white media's unrelenting negative depiction of Black people that constantly subjects Black people to receiving only the fraudulent and worse narratives about ourselves. The white media's unrelenting negative depiction of Black people that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts our reality is much more than just biased media reporting. It's actually a Black racially demoralizing divide and rule psychological warfare campaign. Demoralized divide and rule is a method of maintaining control over a targeted population through constant and unrelenting demoralization. This psychological warfare system is deployed like a massive media marketing campaign that constantly subjects Black people to receiving only the fraudulent and worse narratives about ourselves. When people are constantly inundated with fraudulent negative narratives about themselves, they become very demoralized. And it also creates self-hatred and disunity, which attacks the core foundation of what bonds the people. And they can then be ruled over forever. The ultimate objective is to demoralize Black people to such an extreme extent that we begin to doubt our own ability to govern ourselves, and then give up the idea of liberating ourselves because we've been made to believe that we need white people to govern over our lives. This demoralizing psychological warfare campaign is all possible because people are very much like computers. All you have to do is keep giving people certain information gradually over time, over an extended period of time, and you can persuade an entire generation towards an applied objective. And it doesn't matter that the information presented is untrue. Most black people will act accordingly because they have all been given the same fraudulent negative information about themselves. Through this media propaganda campaign, white oppressive forces have created a self-loathing psychological prison for the minds of millions of black people. Those black people that do not critically think never notices their mental change. Here's the hidden psychological warfare campaign behind the reason why black students are being denied of a black racially affirming education. The white educational system's failure to adequately provide black students with a racially affirming curriculum, as it routinely does so for white students, is actually a social science tactic that is essential for maintaining white social dominance over black people. Because for a ruling class to maintain its position of social dominance over its subordinate population, they must condition the subordinate population from a very early age to accept their subordinate status and to adhere to the authority of the dominant culture. To do so, the education given to the oppressed, from the time that their minds are young and most impressionable, must be the type that denies them of a racially affirming education. When the oppressed population are denied a racially affirming education, this psychology conditions them to accept their subordinate status within the society dominated by their oppressors. In fact, when the oppressed population is denied of a racially affirming education, even the brightest among them may have little if any hope of mentally extracting themselves from their assigned low dominated position within the society. This is the hidden reason why black people are learning more black racially affirming facts from each other than we do so within our white governed schools. Unless we break the monopoly the white society have over our minds, our liberation is not only impossible, it's in fact unthinkable. The white oppressors also deploys a perception management system that creates and sustains false assumptions within society that aids in maintaining white social dominance over black people. Your perception of reality is therefore an elaborate white deception. This is not some feeble-minded conspiracy theory. It's the truth that white oppressive forces don't want black people to ever learn. Perception management programs are well-proven techniques that involve altering the public's perception of reality to suit the objective of the white ruling class. Perception management systems are an essential part of modern information warfare. It's how the white ruling class steers the society and shapes public perceptions in ways that aids in maintaining their social dominance over black people. Case, point, and proof. By systematically feeding false narrative into the society, white propagandists have manipulated millions to believe that black people are the perpetrators of most violent crimes, that black people are the largest benefactors of affirmative actions, and that black people are the largest recipients of welfare. However, all facts are different. However, not because many people believe something to be true doesn't make it true. Often it merely means that they've all received the same false information. This is what the white society has done. They've given us false information. Public perception is rarely, if ever, consistent with facts. Quiet as is kept, most violent crimes in the U.S. are committed by Caucasians. FBI data shows this. Most cops are killed every year by Caucasians. In reality, data shows that the largest recipient of welfare are Caucasian. The largest benefactors of affirmative action are Caucasian women. Therefore, by extension, the white society has benefited most from affirmative action. Your perception of reality is an elaborate white deception created by a racist perception management system that has been put in place for maintaining false assumptions within society that aids in maintaining white dominance over black people. The distortion of reality is actually much more easily achieved than most people realize. This is because public perceptions of reality is not shaped based upon facts or reality. It's actually shaped by the narrative that are repetitively and systematically fed into a society. Therefore, the basic tool required for the distortion of reality is to merely repetitively and systematically feed false narratives into society. The public at large will then begin functioning based upon those distorted narratives instead of the true reality. It's a well proven social science fact. Because the white ruling class controls all of the narratives that are repetitively and systematically fed into our society, they therefore literally owns the interpretation of reality. White social scientists determined a long time ago that by constantly feeding false white exalting and false black marginalizing narrative into society, they could distort public perceptions in ways that creates and sustains false assumptions within the society that aids in maintaining white social dominance over black people. Because of this fraudulent perception management system, your perception of reality is an elaborate white deception. According to white social scientists, perception is more important than reality for controlling and steering society towards an applied objective, because most people function based upon their perceptions rather than reality. Therefore, the white ruling class systematically feed false propaganda into society that distorts public perception in ways that exalts whites and marginalizes black people. Because the white society writes all black narratives, they've also manipulated millions to perceive black people as being the leeches of society that haven't contributed much towards the advancement of society. However, the truth is that in spite of cultural traumas, wrought by the injustice of white racism and slavery, most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either invented by black people or were directly inspired by early inventions by black people. Without black people, there would exist no internet, no cell phones. We wouldn't have cameras and microphones on our cell phones. We wouldn't have the accurate weather forecasting system. We wouldn't have the cataract laser removal scope. There would be no emails, no GPS, no hearing aids, no touch-tone phones, no caller ID, no home surveillance security system, no home game cartridge, no motorized vehicles, no steam engines, no traffic lights, no working light bulb, no elevators, therefore no skyscrapers, no air conditions, no modern color PC, no 3D movies, no central heating, no refrigerators, no helicopters, no washing machines, no lawnmowers, no dryers, no refrigerated trucks, no blood banks, no fiber optics, no nanotechnology, no female sanitary pads, no bathroom tissue holders, no pencil sharpeners, etc., etc. The technological advancement made by black people throughout history has been extraordinary. The hidden reality, in fact, is that there is not a single person on this planet whose life has not been enriched by the many great inventions from the minds of black people. When a well-packaged web of lies have been sold gradually to the masses over generation, the truth will seem utterly ridiculous and the speaker will appear to be a raving lunatic. White people invented the patent office and have always used it to steal the intellectual property rights from black people. Because in order for black inventors to get their inventions mass produced, they have to go before white companies. These companies acquire the right to these inventions and then places white faces in front of the technology. This scenario allows the white society to continue exploiting the intellectual genius of black people while creating the perception that most inventions are coming from the minds of white people, a perception that empowers the white society. In reality, most of the technology that we routinely use from day to day comes from the minds of black people. Your perception of reality is an elaborate white deception. Perception is powerful, and the distortion of public perception has provided the white society with its most effective system used for maintaining white social dominance over black people. The human mind is a complex system, and one of the most remarkable abilities is to perceive the world around us. Our perceptions of the external environment and its people shapes our experiences and our behaviors. Perception is a critical instrument that affects our interaction with others, yet is often overlooked in our daily lives. Intentions are closely linked to perceptions. They can shape how we perceive people and things surrounding us, while our perceptions can influence the goals and actions we pursue. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting and black marginalizing lies through a perception management system. They even miseducate us to believe that the world's first scholar originated among the ancient Greeks. However, the Greeks openly admitted that their knowledge originated from African scholars. When Socrates wrote of his studies in the book Bucyrus, he said that I studied philosophy and medicine in Africa. All of Greece's original scholars received their formal education in Africa. The white society also miseducates us to believe that the father of medicine was a Greek named Hippocrates. However, the true father of medicine was an African named Imhotep. Imhotep was practicing medicine and writing on the subject for more than 2,000 years before Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, was even born. Imhotep is the author of the Egyptian medical text, which contains almost 100 anatomical terms and describes 48 injuries and their treatments. The white society also miseducates us to believe that Africans were illiterate and uncivilized before the Europeans invaded, and that it was Africans that are the Europeans that therefore civilized we Africans. This is in fact an outright lie. The truth of the matter is that when the Europeans invaded Africa, it was a profound betrayal, because long before the Europeans invaded Africa, it was Africans that in fact civilized Europe. Africans introduced science, writing, math, philosophy, and also hygienic practices such as shaving, the use of toothpaste, perfume, fragrance, deodorant, and Africans even introduced the daily bath to Europeans. The world's oldest university, library, manuscript, encyclopedia, human prosthetic, mathematical tools, medical journals, and are all located in Africa. Africans invented the wheel, the paper, the calendar, the concept of 24 hours in a day. Africans are the first to build in stone and the first to smelt metal. These facts are deliberately omitted from our history books, our movies, and TV shows because they refute the myth of white racial superiority over black people. And although Egypt is physically located in Africa, and although carbon date testings have scientifically proven that the ancient kingdom was built by Africans many thousands of years long before the arrival of the first Greeks and Arabs during the 7th century, the white society nonetheless miseducates us to believe that Africa's ancient Egyptians were ridiculously Europeans. The hidden reality is that all scientific facts confirm that Africa's ancient Egyptians were accordingly Africans. The white society and the Arabs gaslight us by pretending that there's a legitimate debate regarding the racial identity of Africa's ancient Egyptians. All scientific fact confirms that Africa's ancient Egyptians were in fact accordingly Africans. As I've already stated, that carbon date testings have scientifically proven that ancient kingdom was built by Africans many thousands of years long before the arrival of the Greeks and Arabs during the 7th century. But it's even more, much more than that. Hair sample testings, melanin concentrated skin testings, bone density, geographical locations, and DNA genetic testings have all scientifically proven that Africa's ancient Egyptians were Africans. In 2012 and 2013, DNA analysis conducted on Pharaoh Tutankhamun, Ramses III, Ramses IV, and several other Egyptian pharaohs by DNA Tribes, an American company that specializes in DNA testings, scientifically proven that Africa's ancient Egyptians were in fact Africans. Their DNA testing proved that they belong to the human Y chromosome group of E1B1A. This is the Y chromosome group of sub-Saharan Africans who currently speak the Niger-Congo languages. The white society also miseducates us to believe that their racial group are the highest evolved African Homo sapiens, and we Africans are the lowest evolved. They subliminally convey this message by placing their racial group at the highest end of the Darwinian evolutionary chart and places the darkest skin on the lowest end. This conveys that they're superior and we're inferior. They also created the false narrative that Caucasians are African Homo sapiens that turn white due to migrating to the colder climate of Europe, an alleged form of cold weather albinism. However, according to two recent studies published in the journal Nature that looked at the DNA fossil hidden in the modern human genome, DNA analysis have scientifically proven that Caucasians are not African albinos, but have instead inherited their skin color and their animalistic hair type from the Neanderthal ancestors. The same studies also found that Africans are the only pure homogeneous human species, and that the Darwinian evolutionary theory chart does not apply to we Africans. We're not even on that chart. Unlike Caucasians that evolved from lower primates, Africans have always been Homo sapiens. Genetic studies have scientifically confirmed that Africans' melanated chocolate skin and woolly black hair are a direct result of Homo sapien DNA. Africans are the true Homo sapiens. The implications of these findings are enormous. This means that Caucasians are literally Neanderthals that masquerade themselves as being albino Homo sapiens. Neanderthals evolved totally separate from Homo sapiens. Now, this might be a bit of a disappointment to those of you who favor the premise that all life originated in Africa and spread out from there. But that story has totally fallen apart. We Homo sapiens came to Africa, but Caucasians are not Homo sapiens. Furthermore, that premise has always negated the fact that when the early African Homo sapiens first traveled into Europe, they encountered thousands of white-skinned Neanderthals already living in Europe. Neanderthals that had already been living in Europe for 80,000 years, according to studies. However, although Caucasians share more physical characteristics with those Neanderthals of Europe than they presently do with melanated Africans, they have totally separated themselves from their Neanderthal ancestors and falsely attached themselves to we African Homo sapiens. They did so in order to falsely give themselves a Homo sapien origin. Whenever those who obviously despises us so uncharacteristically then turns around and makes a claim that they came from us, doing so always somehow benefits themselves. Their narcissistic and racist tendencies result in them taking it a step further by adding the claim that they are the highest evolved Homo sapiens and that we Africans are the lowest evolved. However, DNA analysis have scientifically proven that Africans are Homo sapiens and that Caucasians are Neanderthals. Certainly, this may sound absurd to those of you who haven't conducted your research, but it is well known among those who have conducted this research. Dr. Robert C. Fair, a Caucasian anthropologist and author of the book entitled Species with Amnesia or Forgotten History, he's a Caucasian. He writes that without racist intentions, that Caucasians and Africans are two separate species. Africans are Homo sapiens and Caucasians are Neanderthals. Humanity, he says, isn't one species, but a hybrid species. He continued by saying that if we're of one human family, why then does the African mother, when carrying a Caucasian baby, her body tries to reject her own offspring? He said this is evidence of us being separate species. Now, what Dr. Cypher is referring to isn't commonly known, but it is absolutely true. It's because of the Caucasian's RH rhesus monkey. RH means rhesus monkey factor. This is why whenever a black woman becomes impregnated by a Caucasian, her doctor has to give her a ROGAM shot, RHOGAM injection, to prevent her body from trying to naturally abort it. If a doctor fails to do so, it's medical malpractice. When a woman receives the ROGAM, it protects her immune system from exposure to the current baby's Rh positive blood. If she does not receive the injection, her body will develop antibodies that could attack the positive red blood cells of the babies in subsequent pregnancies, which will cause HDN. HDN can cause serious illnesses, brain damage, or even the death in a fetus of a newborn. This isn't commonly known knowledge, but it's absolutely true. It's why black expecting mothers are always asked, what is the race of the father? The pregnant woman typically receives the ROGAM twice during her pregnancy, once at approximately 28 weeks and once within 72 hours of delivery. In fact, they have to do this to prevent her body from killing her own baby. Had it not been for this biological response within the African woman, there would have been much more mulattoes born during slavery. Our rate of mulatto has significantly low because of this biological response. Had this been the other way around, and it was the whites when they did have shots to get black babies. This has been all over the media, but because it's this way, you don't hear about it. White society always distorts facts, always suppress things that doesn't exalt themselves. This is the reality, okay? Now, also, in the book, The Iceman Inheritance, author Michael J. Bradley, whom himself is also a Caucasian, he writes that perhaps the Caucasians' Neanderthal DNA might explain their inhumane behaviors throughout history. He wrote that throughout history, the Caucasians have demonstrated an almost total disregard for the human lives of non-whites. They've demonstrated an entrenched predisposition for brutal racism that is matched only by their proclivity for deceit, greed, and hunger for power. They alone are the most arrogant and the race most predisposed to racism. All other races have been their enemies or their victims. Their subjugation, murder, and exploitation of all other race are unparalleled. While labeling all other races as being savages, the Caucasians have in fact been the most brutally savage throughout history. These are the people who write the history books. Quite naturally, they distort facts. Bradley believes that these proclivities among Caucasians are inherently connected to their true Neanderthal prehistoric origins. The white society has whitewashed facts. They systematically feed false information into our society that exalts themselves and marginalizes black people. And our society then functions based upon those false narratives. This creates false assumptions within society that aids in maintaining white social dominance. It is a perception management system. These are the systems that's in place for maintaining white social dominance over black people. We must elevate our minds above the biblical fairy tale and the slave syndrome myth, and recognize that there are social sciences that are connected to the white society's monopoly over information. The white society has turned his monopoly over information into his greatest weapon used for maintaining his social dominance over black people by feeding disinformation into our society. Brothers and sisters, it's time to wake up and learn the truth of our plighted condition. The time of believing in things that insult our own intelligence is past. You will never emancipate your minds from white mental slavery, believing in a Bible written by our ungodly enemies. You will never emancipate yourself from mental slavery, believing that we're being controlled by a silly slave syndrome myth. You must learn the truth. The truth is that they are nefarious social sciences. The white society deploys psychological warfare to shape perceptions in ways that aids him in maintaining his social dominance. His propaganda is embedded in the education we're taught, within the news reports we see, even in movies when we think we're being entertained. We're being perpetually manipulated to think in ways that serves and protect the system of white supremacy. This is our hidden reality. Wake up to reality.